The following is a conversation with Dan Kokotov, VP of Engineering at Rev.ai, which is, by many metrics, the best speech-to-text AI engine in the world. Rev, in general, is a company that does captioning and transcription of audio by humans and by AI. I've been using their services for a couple of years now and am planning to use Rev to add both captions and transcripts to some of the previous and future episodes of this podcast to make it easier for people to read through the conversation or reference various parts of the episode, since that's something that quite a few people requested. I'll probably do a separate video on that with links on the podcast website so people can provide suggestions and improvements there. Quick mention of our sponsors: Athletic Greens all-in-one nutrition drink, Blinkist app that summarizes books, Business Wars podcast, and Cash App. So the choice is health, wisdom, or money. Choose wisely, my friends. And if you wish, click the sponsor links below to get a discount and to support this podcast. As a side note, let me say that I reached out to Dan and the Rev team for a conversation because I've been using and genuinely loving their service and really curious about how it works. I previously talked to the head of Adobe Research for the same reason. For me, there's a bunch of products, usually it's software, that comes along and just makes my life way easier. Examples are Adobe Premiere for video editing, Isotope RX for cleaning up audio, AutoHotkey on Windows for automating keyboard or mouse tasks, Emacs as an IDE for everything, including the universe itself. I can keep on going, but you get the idea. I just like talking to people who create things I'm a big fan of. That said, after doing this conversation, the folks at Rev.ai offered to sponsor this podcast in the coming months. This conversation is not sponsored by the guest. It probably goes without saying, but I should say it anyway, that you cannot buy your way onto this podcast. I don't know why you would want to. I wanted to bring this up to make a specific point that no sponsor will ever influence what I do on this podcast, or to the best of my ability influence what I think. I wasn't really thinking about this, for example, when I interviewed Jack Dorsey, who is the CEO of Square that happens to be sponsoring this podcast. But I should really make it explicit. I will never take money for bringing a guest on. Every guest on this podcast is someone I genuinely am curious to talk to or just genuinely loves something they've created. As I sometimes get criticized for, I'm just a fan of people, and that's who I talk to. As I also talk about way too much, money is really never a consideration. In general, no amount of money can buy my integrity. That's true for this podcast, and that's true for anything else I do. If you enjoy this thing, subscribe on YouTube, review it on Apple Podcast, follow on Spotify, support on Patreon, or connect with me on Twitter at Lex Friedman. As usual, I'll do a few minutes of ads now and no ads in the middle. I try to make these interesting, but I give you timestamps, so if you skip, please still check out the sponsors by clicking the links in the description. It is the best way to support this podcast. This show is sponsored by, who's quickly becoming my favorite sponsor, Athletic Greens, the all-in-one daily drink to support better health and peak performance. I just, in fact, actually finished drinking it. It replaced the multivitamin for me and went far beyond that with 75 vitamins and minerals. I do intermittent fasting of 16 to 24 hours every day and always break my fast with Athletic Greens. I can't say enough good things, can't stop raving about these guys. It helps me not worry whether I'm getting the nutrients I need. One of the many reasons I'm a fan is that they keep iterating on the formula, keep improving it, like all good engineers and scientists always should be. Life is not about reaching perfection. It's about constantly striving for it and making sure each iteration is a positive delta. The other thing I've taken for a long time outside of Athletic Greens is fish oil. So I'm especially excited now that they're selling fish oil and are offering listeners of this very podcast free 1-month supply of wild-caught omega-3 fish oil when you go to athleticgreens.com/Lex to claim the special offer. By the way, if the link doesn't seem to work for you for whatever reason, sometimes it doesn't if you have an ad blocker enabled. So try to turn off your ad blocker for this one particular case. But they're also trying to fix it, so they're on top of it. Click the athleticgreens.com/Lex link in the description to get the fish oil and the all-in-one supplement I rely on for the nutritional foundation of my physical and mental performance. This episode is supported by Blinkist, my favorite app for learning new things. Blinkist takes the key ideas from thousands of nonfiction books and condenses them down into just 15 minutes that you can read or listen to. I'm a big believer in reading at least an hour every day. As part of that, I use Blinkist to try out a book I may otherwise never have a chance to read. And in general, it's a great way to broaden your view of the idea landscape out there and find books that you may want to read more deeply. With Blinkist, you get unlimited access to read or listen to a massive library of condensed nonfiction books. I also use Blinkist's Shortcasts. That's a lot of S's. To quickly catch up on a podcast episode I've missed. Right now, Blinkist has a special offer just for the listeners of this podcast. Let me take a sip of this drink first. If you're listening to this, I dare you to try to guess which drink I'm drinking. Go to Blinkist.com/Lex to start your free 7-day trial and get 25% off a Blinkist premium membership. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist, Blinkist.com/Lex to get 25% off and a 7-day free trial. Blinkist.com/Lex. This episode is also brought to you by Business Wars Podcast. Tech entrepreneurs are in all-out race to cash in on our collective addiction to social media. That sentence was way harder to pronounce than I thought when I first started saying it. In the newest season of Wondery's Business Wars, TikTok versus Instagram, they track the war between two social media giants. I have spoken about possibly entering this space by helping build a new social network. This is something I struggle with quite a bit because it feels like standing on the edge of a cliff hoping to fly. I want to keep my mind and heart open, fragile, but it seems that the world can too easily destroy such a mind, and so I wonder if I'm able to face such challenges. Perhaps the choice isn't mine to make. Perhaps it's already been made. Anyway, this podcast season looks at just one heated competition in the space where the game, in my view, is not one that makes for a better world. Listen to the latest season of Business Wars, TikTok versus Instagram on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or listen ad-free by joining Wondery Plus in the Wondery app. I just in general, I highly recommend Wondery. There's a lot of good podcasts on there. Finally, the show is presented by Cash App, the #1 finance app in the App Store. When you get it, use code LEXPODCAST. Cash App lets you send money to friends, buy Bitcoin, and invest in the stock market with as little as $1. I'm thinking of doing some conversation with folks who work in and around the cryptocurrency space. Similar to artificial intelligence, there are a lot of charlatans in this space, but there's a lot of free thinkers as well, technical geniuses that are worth exploring ideas with in depth and with care. And I think it's pretty clear that cryptocurrency is here to stay. Bitcoin just hit $32,000. Anyway, if you get Cash App from the App Store or Google Play and use code LEXPODCAST, you get $10. And Cash App will also donate $10 to FIRST, an organization that is helping to advance robotics and STEM education for young people around the world. And now, here's my conversation with Dan Kokotov. You mentioned science fiction on the phone, so let's go with the ridiculous first. What's the greatest sci-fi novel of all time in your view? And maybe what ideas do you find philosophically fascinating about it?
The greatest sci-fi novel of all time is Dune, and the second greatest is The Children of Dune, and the third greatest is The God Emperor of Dune. So I'm a huge fan of the whole series. I mean, it's just an incredible world that he created. And I don't know if you've read the book or not.
No, I have not. It's one of my biggest regrets, especially because the new movie is coming out.
Right.
And everyone's super excited about it. It's ridiculous to say and sorry to interrupt, is that I used to play the video game. It used to be Dune. That's, I guess you would call that real-time strategy.
Right. I think I remember that game.
Yeah, it's kind of awesome. 90s or something. I think I played it actually when I was in Russia.
I definitely remember it. I was not in Russia anymore. I think at the time that I used to live in Russia, I think video games were about like the suspicion of Pong. I think Pong was pretty much like the greatest game I ever got to play in Russia, which was still a privilege, right, in that age.
So you didn't get color? You didn't get like...
Well, so I left Russia in 1991, right?
1991, okay.
So I was one of the few lucky kids because my mom was a programmer. So I would go to her work, right? I would take the metro. I'd go to her work and play like on, I guess, the equivalent of like a 286 PC, you know?
Nice. With floppy disks.
Yes.
So, okay, but back to Dune. What do you get?
Back to Dune. And by the way, the new movie I'm pretty interested in, but
You're skeptical?
I'm a little skeptical. I saw the trailer. I don't know. So there's a David Lynch movie, Dune, as you may know. And I'm a huge David Lynch fan, by the way. So the movie is somewhat controversial, but it's a little confusing, but it captures kind of the mood of the book better than I would say like most any adaptation. And like Dune is so much about kind of mood and the world, right? But back to the philosophical point. So in the fourth book, God Emperor of Dune, there's a sort of setting where Leto, one of the characters, he's become this weird sort of God Emperor. He's turned into a gigantic worm. I mean, you kind of have to read the book to understand what that means.
So the worms are involved.
Worms are involved. You probably saw the worms in the trailer, right?
Yeah. And in the video game.
So he kind of like merges with the swarm and becomes this tyrant of the world. And he like oppresses the people for a long time, right? But he has a purpose. And the purpose is to kind of break through kind of a stagnation period in civilization, right? But people have gotten too comfortable, right? And so he kind of oppresses them so that they explode and like go on to colonize new worlds and kind of renew the forward momentum of humanity, right? Mm-hmm. And so to me, that's kind of like fascinating, right? You need a little bit of pressure and suffering, right, to kind of like make progress, not get too comfortable. I don't know, maybe that's a bit of a cruel philosophy to take away, but
that seems to be the case, unfortunately. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of suffering. So one of the reasons we're talking today is that a bunch of people requested that I do transcripts for this podcast and do captioning. I used to make all kinds of YouTube videos, and I would go on Upwork, I think. Mm-hmm. And I would hire folks to do transcription. And it was always a pain in the ass, if I'm being honest. And then I don't know how I discovered Rev, but when I did, it was this feeling of like, holy shit, somebody figured out how to do it just really easily. I'm such a fan of just when people take a problem and they just make it easy.
Right.
You know, like just there's so many. It's like there's so many things in life that you might not even be aware of that are painful. Then Rev, you just like give the audio, give the video. You can actually give a YouTube link, and then it comes back like a day later or 2 days later, whatever the hell it is, with the captions, you know, all in a standardized format. I don't know. It was truly a joy. So I thought I had, you know, just for the hell of it, talk to you. That one other product, it just made my soul feel good. One other product I've used like that is for people who might be familiar, is called Isotope RX. It's for audio editing, and like, and that's another one where it was like, you just drop it. I dropped in the audio and it just cleans everything up really nicely. All the stupid, like the mouth sounds, and sometimes there's background like sounds due to the malfunction of the equipment. It can clean that stuff up. It has like general voice denoising. It has like automation capabilities where you can do batch processing and you can put a bunch of effects. I mean, it just, I don't know. Everything else sucked for like voice-based cleanup that I've ever used. I've used Audition, Adobe Audition. I've used all kinds of other things with plugins. You have to kind of figure it all out. You have to do it manually. Here, it just worked. So that's another one in this whole pipeline that just brought joy to my heart. Anyway, all that to say is Rev put a smile to my face. So can you maybe take a step back and say, what is Rev and how does it work? And Rev or Rev.com?
Rev.com. Same thing, I guess. Though we do have Rev.ai now as well, which we can talk about later.
So, like, do you have the actual domain, or is it just
the actual domain? But we also use it kind of as a sub brand.
Oh,
so we use Rev.ai to denote our ASR services, right? And Rev.com is kind of our more human and to the end user services.
Brilliant. So it's like WordPress.com and WordPress.org. They actually have separate brands that, like, I don't know if you're familiar with what those are.
Yeah.
They provide almost like a separate branch of...
A little bit. I think with that, it's like WordPress.org is kind of their open source, right? And WordPress.com is sort of their hosted commercial offering.
Yes.
And with us, the differentiation is a little bit different, but maybe similar idea.
Yeah. Okay, so what is Rev?
Before I launch into what is Rev, I was going to say, like you're talking about, like, Rev was music to your ears.
Yeah.
Your spiel was music to my ears. And to us, the founders of Rev, because Rev was kind of founded to improve on the model of Upwork. That was kind of the original, or part of their original impetus. Like our CEO, Jason, was an early employee of Upwork, so he's very familiar with their
Upwork, the company.
Upwork, the company. And so he was very familiar with that model, and he wanted to make the whole experience better because he knew, like, when you go, at that time, Upwork was primarily programmers. So the main thing they offered is, if you want to hire, someone to help you code a little site, right? You could go on Upwork, you could, like, browse through a list of freelancers, pick a programmer, have a contract with them and have them do some work. But it was kind of a difficult experience because for you would kind of have to browse through all these people, right? And you have to decide, okay, like, well, is this guy good? Or is somebody else better? And naturally, you're going to Upwork because you're not an expert, right? If you're an expert, you probably wouldn't be, like, getting a programmer from Upwork. So how can you really tell? So there's kind of, like, a lot of potential regret, right? What if I choose a bad person? They're, like, going to be late on the work. It's going to be a painful experience. Mm-hmm. And for the freelancer, it was also painful because, half the time they spent not on actually doing the work, but kind of figuring out how can I make my profile most attractive to the buyer, right? And they're not an expert on that either. So, like, Rav's idea was, let's remove the barrier, right? Like, let's make it simple where we'll pick a few verticals that are fairly standardizable. We actually started with translation, and then we added audio transcription a bit later. And we'll just make it a website. You go, give us your files, we'll give you back the results, as soon as possible. Originally maybe it was 48 hours, then we made it shorter and shorter and shorter.
There's a rush processing too.
There's a rush processing now. And we'll hide all the details from you, right?
Yeah.
And, like, that's kind of exactly what you're experiencing, right? You don't need to worry about the details of how the sausage is made.
That's really cool. So you picked, like, a vertical. By vertical, you mean basically a
service category.
Why translation? Is Rev thinking of potentially going into other verticals in the future? Or is this, like, the focus now is translation, transcription, like language?
The focus now is language, or speech services generally, speech to text, language services. You can kind of group them however you want. But we originally, the categorization was work from home. So we wanted work that was done by people on a computer. We weren't trying to get into, TaskRabbit type of things. And something that could be relatively standard, not a lot of options. So we could kind of present this simplified interface, right?
Yeah.
So programming wasn't, like, a good fit because each programming project is kind of unique, right? We're looking for something that transcription is, you have 5 hours of audio, it's 5 hours of audio, right? Translation is somewhat similar in that, you can have a 5-page document, and then you just can price it by that. And then you pick the language you want, and that's mostly all it is to it. So those were a few criteria. We started with translation because we saw the need, and we picked a kind of a specialty of translation where we would translate things like birth certificates,
So
immigration documents, things like that. And so they were fairly even more well-defined and easy to kind of tell if we did a good job.
So you can literally charge per type of document? Was that the... So what is it now? Is it per word or something like that? Like how do you measure the effort involved in a particular thing?
So now, so for audio transcription, right, it's per audio minute.
Well, yes.
For translation, we don't really actually focus on that anymore. But back when it was still a main business of Rev, it was per page, right, or per word, depending on the kind of.
Because you can also do translation now on the audio, right?
Mm-hmm. So, like subtitles. So it would be both transcription and translation. That's right.
I wanted to test the system to see how good it is, to see like how well is Russian supported.
I think so. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to try it out. I mean,
but now it's only in like the one direction, right? So you start with English, and then you can have subtitles in Russian. Not really the other way.
Got it. Because I'm deeply curious about this. When COVID opens up a little bit, when the world opens up a little bit.
You want to build your brand in Russia?
No, I don't. First of all, I'm allergic to the word brand.
Second
of all, I'm definitely not building any brands in Russia.
Nice.
But I'm going to Paris to talk to the translators of Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. There's this famous couple that does translation. And, I'm more and more thinking of how is it possible to have a conversation with a Russian speaker? Because I have just some number of famous Russian speakers that I'm interested in talking to.
Mm-hmm.
And my Russian is not strong enough to be witty and funny. I'm already an idiot in English. I'm an extra level of like awkward idiot in Russian, but I can understand it, right? And I also like wonder how can I create a compelling English-Russian experience for an English speaker. Like there's a guy named Grigory Perelman who's a mathematician who obviously doesn't speak any English. So I would probably incorporate like a Russian translator into the picture. And then it would be like not to use a weird term, but like a three person thing where it's like a dance of where, like I understand it one way, they don't understand the other way, but I'll be asking questions in English. I don't know the right way.
Complicated.
It's complicated, but I feel like it's worth the effort for certain kinds of people. One of whom I'm confident is Vladimir Putin. I'm for sure talking to. I really want to make it happen because I think I could do a good job with it. But the right, understanding the fundamentals of translation is something I'm really interested in. So that's why I'm starting with the actual translators of like Russian literature because they understand the nuance and the beauty of the language and how it goes back and forth. But I also want to see like in speech, how can we do it in real time? So that's like a little bit of a baby project that I hope to push forward. But anyway,
it's a challenging thing. So just to share, my dad actually does translation. Not professionally. He writes poetry. That was kind of always his not a hobby, but he had a job, like a day job, but his passion was always writing poetry. And then we got to America, and he started also translating. First, he was translating English poetry to Russian. Now he also goes the other way. He kind of gained some small fame in that world, anyways, because recently this poet like Louise Gluck, I don't know if you know of, so American poet. She was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature, and so my dad had translated one of her books of poetry into Russian. He was one of the few, so he kind of they asked him and gave an interview to Radio Svoboda, if you know what that is, and he kind of talked about some of the intricacies of translating poetry. So that's like an extra level of difficulty, right? Because translating poetry is even more challenging than translating just interviews.
Do you remember any experiences and challenges to having to do the translation that stick out to you, like something he's talked about?
I mean, a lot of it, I think, is word choice, right? It's the way Russian is structured is, first of all, quite different than the way English is structured, right? Just there's inflections in Russian and genders, and they don't exist in English. That's one of the reasons, actually, why machine translation is quite difficult for English to Russian and Russian to English, because they're such different languages. But then English has a huge number of words, many more than Russian, actually, I think. So it's often difficult to find the right word to convey the same emotional meaning.
Yeah, Russian language, they play with words much more. So you were mentioning that Rev was kind of born out of trying to take a vertical and an Upwork and then standardize it. So
We're just trying to make the freelancer marketplace idea better, right? Better for both customers and better for the freelancers themselves.
is there something else to the story of Rev, finding Rev? Like what did it take to bring it to actually to life? Was there any pain points?
Plenty of pain points. I mean, as often the case, it's with scaling it up, right? And in this case, the scaling is kind of scaling the marketplace, so to speak, right? Rev is essentially a two-sided marketplace, right? Because there's the customers and then there's the revers. If there's not enough revers are what we call our freelancers. So if there's not enough revers, then customers have a bad experience, right? It takes longer to get your work done, things like that. If there's too many, then the revers have a bad experience because they might log on to see like what work is available and there's not very much work, right? So kind of keeping that balance is a quite challenging problem, and that's like a problem we've been working on for many years, and we're still like refining our methods, right?
If you can kind of talk to this gig economy idea, I did a bunch of different psychology experiments on Mechanical Turk, for example. I've asked to do different kinds of very tricky computer vision annotation on Mechanical Turk, and it's connecting people in a more systematized way. I would say, between task and what would you call that? Worker is what Mechanical Turk calls it. What do you think about this world of gig economies, of there being a service that connects customers to workers in a way that's like massively distributed, like potentially scaling to, it could be scaled to like tens of thousands of people, right? Is there something interesting about that world that you can speak to?
Yeah, well, we don't think of it as kind of gig economy. Like to some degree, I don't like the word gig that much, right? Because to some degree it diminishes the work being done, right? It sounds kind of like almost amateurish. Well, maybe in like music industry, like gig is a standard term, but in work, it kind of sounds like, oh, it's frivolous. To us, it's improving the nature of working from home on your own time and on your own terms, right? Yes. And kind of taking away geographical limitations and time limitations, right? So, many of our freelancers are maybe work from home moms, right? And, they don't want the traditional 9-to-5 job, but they want to make some income. And Rev kind of like allows them to do that and decide like exactly how much to work and when to work. Or by the same token, maybe someone wants to live the mountaintop, life, right? Cabin in the woods, but they still want to make some money. And like generally that wouldn't be compatible before this new world. You kind of had to choose. But like with Rev, like you feel like you don't have to choose.
Can you speak to like what's the demographics, like distribution, like where do Revers live? Is it from all over the world? Like what is it? Do you have a sense of what's
from
out
all
there?
over the world? Most of them are in the US. That's the majority. Because most of our work is audio transcription, and so you have to speak pretty good English.
Yes.
So the majority of them are from the US. So we have people in some other of the English-speaking countries. And as far as like US, it's really all over the place. For some years now, we've been doing these little meetings where the management team will go to some place and we'll try to meet Revers. And, pretty much wherever we go, it's pretty easy to find, a large number of Revers. The most recent one we did is in Utah. But anywhere really.
Are they from all walks of life? Are these young folks, older folks?
Yeah, all walks of life really. Like I said, one category is, the work from home mom, students, who want to make some extra income. There are some people who maybe they have some social anxiety, so they don't want to be in the office, right? And this is one way for them to make a living. So it's really pretty wide variety. But like on the flip side, for example, one Rever we were talking to was a person who had a fairly high-powered career before and was kind of like taking a break and just she was almost doing this just to explore and learn about, the gig economy, quote unquote, right? So it really is a pretty wide variety of folks.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting through the captioning process for me to learn about the revers because like some are clearly like weirdly knowledgeable about technical concepts. Like you can tell by how good they are at like capitalizing stuff, like technical terms, like in machine learning and deep learning.
Right.
Like I've used Rev to annotate to caption the deep learning lectures or machine learning lectures I did at MIT, and it's funny. Like a large number of them were like, I don't know if they looked it up or were already knowledgeable, but they do a really good job at like. I don't know.
They invest time into these things. They will like do research. They will Google things,
That's
to
all.
kind of make sure they get it right. But to some of them, it's like it's actually part of the enjoyment of the work. Like they'll tell us, I love doing this because I get paid to watch a documentary on something, right? And I learn something while I'm transcribing, right? Pretty cool.
Yeah. So what's that captioning transcription process look like for the Rever? Can you maybe speak to that to give people a sense? Like how much is automated, how much is manual, what's the actual interface look like, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so we've invested a pretty good amount of time to give like our Revers the best tools possible. So typical day for Rever, they might log into their workspace, they'll see a list of audios that need to be transcribed, and we try to give them tools to pick specifically the ones they want to do. So maybe some people like to do longer audios or shorter audios. People have their preferences. Some people like to do audios in a particular subject or from a particular country. So we try to give people the tools to control things like that. And then when they pick what they want to do, we'll launch a specialized editor that we build to make transcription as efficient as possible. They'll start with a speech rec draft. So, we have our machine learning model for automated speech recognition. They'll start with that, and then our tools are optimized to help them correct that.
So it's basically a process of correction.
Yeah, it depends on, I would say the audio. If the audio itself is pretty good, like probably like our podcast right now would be quite good. So the ASR would do a fairly good job. But if you imagine someone recorded a lecture, in the back of a auditorium, right, where like the speaker is really far away and there's maybe a lot of crosstalk and things like that, then maybe the ASR wouldn't do a good job. So the person might say like, you know what, I'm just going to do it from scratch.
Yeah.
So it kind of really depends.
What would you say is the speed that you can possibly get? Like, what's the fastest? Is it possible to get real time or no? As you're like listening, can you write as fast as
real time would be pretty difficult. It's actually it's not an easy job. We actually encourage everyone at the company to try to be a transcriber for a day, transcriptionist for a day. And it's way harder than you might think it is, right? Because people talk fast and people have accents and all this kind of stuff. So real time is pretty difficult.
Is it possible? Like there's somebody, we're probably going to use Rev to caption this. They're listening to this right now. What do you think is the fastest you could possibly get on this right now?
I think on a good audio, maybe 2 to 3x, I would say, real time.
Meaning it takes 2 to 3 times longer than the actual audio of the podcast. Yeah. This is so meta. I could just imagine the Revers working on this right now.
Like, you're way wrong.
You're way wrong. This takes way longer. But yeah, it definitely.
Or you doubted me. I could do real time.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned ASR. Can you speak to what is ASR, automatic speech recognition? How much, like, what is the gap between perfect human performance and perfect or pretty damn good ASR?
Yeah, so ASR, automatic speech recognition, it's a class of machine learning problem, right? To take, speech like we were talking and transform it into a sequence of words, essentially.
So audio of people talking.
Audio to words. And, there's a variety of different approaches and techniques, which we could talk about later if you want. So, we think we have pretty much the world's best ASR for this kind of speech, right? So there's different kinds of domains, right, for ASR. Like one domain might be voice assistants, right? So Siri. very different than what we're doing, right? Because Siri, there's fairly limited vocabulary. You might ask Siri to play a song or, order a pizza or whatever. And it's very good at doing that. Very different from when we're talking in a very unstructured way. Mm-hmm. And Siri will also generally adapt to your voice and stuff like this. So for this kind of audio, we think we have the best. And our accuracy right now, I think it's maybe 14% word error rate on our test suite that we generally use to measure. So word error rate is one way to measure accuracy for ASR, right?
So what's 14% word error rate?
So 14% means across this test suite of a variety of different audios, it would get in some way 14% of the words wrong. 14% of the words wrong.
Yeah.
So the way you kind of calculate it is you might add up insertions, deletions, and substitutions, right? So insertions is extra words. Deletions are words that we said but weren't in the transcript, right? Substitutions is you said apple, but the ASR thought it was able, something like this. Human accuracy, most people think realistically it's 3%, 2% word error rate would be the max achievable. So there's still quite a gap, right?
Would you say that, so YouTube, when I upload videos, often generates automatic captions. Are you sort of, from a company perspective, from a tech perspective, are you trying to beat YouTube? Google? It's a hell of a... So Google, I don't know how seriously they take this task, but I imagine it's quite serious. And they... Google is probably up there in terms of their teams on ASR or just NLP, natural language processing, different technologies. So do you think you can beat Google?
On this kind of stuff, yeah, we think so.
Google just woke up on my phone. This is hilarious. Okay.
Now Google is listening, sending it back to headquarters. Who are these rough people?
But that's the goal?
No, yeah, we measure ourselves against Google, Amazon, Microsoft, some smaller competitors. And we use our internal test suite. We try to compose it of a pretty representative set of audios. Maybe it's some podcasts, some videos, some interviews, some lectures, things like that, right? And we beat them in our own testing. And
actually, Rev offers automated, you can actually just do the automated captioning. So I guess it's way cheaper, whatever it is, whatever the rates are.
Yeah. So
it's by the way, it used to be $1 per minute for captioning and transcription. I think it's $1.15 or something like that.
$1.25.
$1.25. Mm-hmm. $1.25 now. Yeah, it's pretty cool. That was the other thing that was surprising to me. It was actually the cheapest thing you could. I don't remember it being cheaper. You could on Upwork get cheaper, but it was clear to me that that's going to be really shitty.
Yeah.
So you're also competing on price. I think there were services that you can get similar to Rev kind of feel to it, but it wasn't as automated. The drag and drop, the entirety of the interface. It's the thing we're talking about. Mm-hmm. I'm such a huge fan of frictionless, Amazon's single buy button, whatever.
Yeah. That one click.
The one click. That's genius right there. That is so important for services.
Yeah.
That simplicity. And Rev is almost there. There's some, I'm trying to think. So I stopped using this pipeline, but Rev offers it and I like it, but it was causing me some issues on my side, which is you can connect it to Dropbox, mm-hmm. and it generates the files in Dropbox. So it closes the loop to where I don't have to go to Rev at all, and I can download it. I don't have to go to Rev at all and to download the files. It could just automatically copy them.
Right, you put in your Dropbox and a day later or maybe a few hours later, depending on if you get rush, it just shows up. Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to do it programmatically too. Is there an API interface you can? Yeah. I was trying to through Python to download stuff automatically, but then I realized this is the programmer in me. Dude, you don't need to automate everything in life like flawlessly because I wasn't doing enough captions to justify to myself the time investment into automating everything perfectly.
Yeah, I would say if you're doing so many interviews that your biggest roadblock is clicking on the ref download button, now you're talking about Elon Musk levels of business. But for sure, we have a variety of ways to make it easy. There's the integration you mentioned. I think it's through a company called Zapier, which kind of can connect Dropbox to Rev and vice versa. We have an API if you want to really customize it. If you want to create the Lex Friedman CMS or whatever
for this whole thing. Okay, cool. So can you speak to the ASR a little bit more? Like, what does it take, like approach wise, machine learning wise? How hard is this problem? How do you get to the 3% error rate? Like, what's your vision of all of this?
Yeah, well, the 3% error rate is definitely that's the grand vision. We'll see what it takes to get there. But we believe, in ASR, the biggest thing is the data, right? Like that's true of a lot of machine learning problems today, right? The more data you have and the higher quality the data, the better labeled the data. That's how you get good results. And we at Rev have kind of the best data. Like we have,
you're literally. Your business model is annotating the data.
Our business model is being paid to annotate the data.
Being paid to annotate the data.
So it's kind of like a pretty magical flywheel.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of ridden this flywheel to this point. And we think we're still kind of in the early stages of figuring out all the parts of the flywheel to use, because we have the final transcripts and we have the audios. And we train on that, but we, in principle, also have all the edits that the revers make, right?
That's interesting. How can you use that as data?
That's something for us to figure out in the future. But we feel like we're only in the early stages, right?
So the data is there. That'd be interesting, almost like a recurrent neural net for fixing transcripts. I always remember we did segmentation annotation for driving data, so segmenting the scene, like visual data, and you can get all. So it was people were drawing polygons around different objects and so on, and it always felt like there was a lot of information in the sequence of clicking that people do, the kind of fixing of the polygons that they do. Now, there's a few papers written about how to draw polygons with recurrent neural nets, to try to learn from the human clicking, but it was just experimental. It was one of those CVPR type papers that people do a really tiny data set. It didn't feel like people really tried to do it seriously. Yeah, I wonder if there's information in the fixing that's high, that provides deeper set of signal than just the raw data.
The intuition is for sure there must be, right?
There must be.
In all kinds of signals and how long you took to make that edit and stuff like that. It's gonna be up to us. That's why the next couple of years is super exciting for us, right?
So that's what the focus is now. You mentioned Rev.ai. That's where you want to.
Yeah. So Rev.ai is kind of our way of bringing this ASR to the rest of the world, right? So when we started. We were human only, and then we kind of created this Temi service. I think you might have used it, which was kind of ASR for the consumer, right? So if you don't want to pay $1.25, but you want to pay, now it's 25 cents a minute, I think, and you get the transcript, the machine generated transcript, and you get an editor, and you can kind of fix it up yourself, right? Then we started using the ASR for our own human transcriptionists. And then the kind of Rev.ai is the final step of the journey, which is, we have this amazing engine. What can people build with it, right? What kind of new applications could be enabled if you have speech track that's that accurate?
Do you have ideas for this, or is it just providing it as a service and seeing what people come up with?
It's providing it as a service and seeing what people come up with and kind of learning from what people do with it. And we have ideas of our own as well, of course, but it's a little bit like, when AWS provided the building blocks, right? Yeah. And they saw what people built with it, and they try to make it easier to build those things, right? And we kind of hope to do the same thing.
Although AWS kind of does a shitty job of like, I'm continually surprised. Like Mechanical Turk, for example, how shitty the interface is. We're talking about like Rev making me feel good. Like when I first discovered Mechanical Turk, the initial idea of it was like, it made me feel like Rev does, but then the interface is like, come on.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Why is it so painful? Does nobody at Amazon want to like seriously invest in it? It felt like you could make so much money if you took this effort seriously. And it feels like they have a committee of like two people just sitting back, like a meeting. They meet once a month. Like, what are we gonna do with Mechanical Turk? If it's like two websites make me feel like this, that and Craigslist.org, whatever the hell it is. It feels like it's designed in the 90s.
Well, Craigslist basically hasn't been updated pretty much since the guy originally
Do you seriously
built.
think there's a team? Like, how big is the team working on Mechanical Turk?
I don't know. There's some team, right?
I feel like there isn't. I'm skeptical.
Yeah. Well, if
it's
nothing
possible.
else, they benefit from, the other teams like moving things forward, right? In a small way.
Possibly.
But no, I know what you mean. We use Mechanical Turk for a couple of things as well, and it's painful UI.
It's painful, but yeah, it works.
I think most people. The thing is, most people don't really use the UI, right? Like like we, for example,
that's right.
Use it through the API, right? So
yeah, but even the API documentation and so on, like it's super outdated. Like I don't even know what to. I mean, the same criticism. As long as we're ranting, my same criticism goes to the APIs of most of these companies, like Google, for example. The API for the different services is just the documentation is so shitty. Like it's not so shitty. I should actually be. I should exhibit some gratitude. Okay, let's practice some gratitude. The documentation is pretty good. Like most of the things that the API makes available is pretty good. It's just that in the sense that it's accurate, sometimes outdated, but like the degree of explanations with examples is only covering, I would say, like 50% of what's possible. Mm-hmm. And it just feels a little bit like there's a lot of natural questions that people would want to ask that doesn't get covered. And it feels like it's almost there. Like it's such a magical thing. Like the Maps API, YouTube API. There's a bunch of
I gotta imagine it's like, there's probably some team at Google, right, responsible for writing this documentation. It's probably not the engineers, right? And probably this team is not, where you want to be.
Well, it's a weird thing. I sometimes think about this for somebody who wants to also build a company. I think about this a lot. YouTube, the service is one of the most magical. Like, I'm so grateful that YouTube exists, and yet they seem to be quite clueless on so many things, like that everybody is screaming them at. Like, it feels like whatever the mechanism that you use to listen to your quote unquote customers, which is like the creators, is not very good. Mm-hmm. Like there's literally people that are like screaming why, like their new YouTube studio, for example. There's like features that were like begged for a really long time, like being able to upload multiple videos at the same time. That was missing for a really, really long time. Now, like there's probably things that I don't know, which is maybe for that kind of huge infrastructure, it's actually very difficult to build some of these features. But the fact that wasn't communicated and it felt like you're not being heard. Like, I remember this experience for me, and it's not a pleasant experience. Yeah. And it feels like the company doesn't give a damn about you. And that's something to think about. I'm not sure what that is. That might have to do with just like small groups working on these small features, on these specific features. And there's no overarching like dictator type of human that says like, why the hell are we neglecting, like Steve Jobs type of character? There's people that we need to speak to, the people that like want to love our product and they don't. Let's fix
maybe
this
at
shit.
Some point you just get so fixated on the numbers, right? And it's like, well, the numbers are pretty great, right?
That's
like
right.
People are watching, doesn't seem to be a problem, right?
Doesn't seem to be a problem.
And you're not like the person that like built this thing, right? So you really care about it.
Yeah.
You know, you're just there. You came in as a product manager, right? You got hired sometime later. Your mandate is like increase this number, like, you know, 10%, right? And you just...
That's brilliantly put. Like if there's a lesson in this, is don't reduce your company into a metric of like how much, like you said, how much people watching the videos and so on, and like convince yourself that everything is working just because the numbers are going up.
Yeah,
there's something, you have to have a vision. You have to want people to love your stuff, because love is ultimately the beginning of like a successful long-term company. Is they always should love your product.
You have to be like a creator and have that like creator's love for your own thing, right? Like, and you paint by, you know, these comments, right? And probably like Apple, I think, did this generally like really well. You know, they're well known for kind of keeping teams small even when they were big, right? And you know, he was an engineer. Like there's that book, Creative Selection. I don't know if you read it, by a Apple engineer named Ken Kosienda. It's kind of a great book actually, because unlike most of these business books where it's, you know, here's how Steve Jobs ran the company, it's more like, here's how life was like for me, you know, an engineer. Here are the projects I worked on, and here what it was like to pitch Steve Jobs, you know, on like, you know, I think he was in charge of like the keyboard and the autocorrection, right? And at Apple, like Steve Jobs reviewed everything, and so he was like, this is what it was like to show my demos to Steve Jobs, and you know, to change them because like Steve Jobs didn't like how, you know, the shape of the little key was off because the rounding of the corner was like not quite right or something like this, right? He was famously a stickler for this kind of stuff. But because the teams were small, you really owned this stuff, right? So you really cared.
Yeah, Elon Musk does that similar kind of thing with Tesla, which is really interesting. There's another lesson in leadership in that, is to be obsessed with the details, and like he talks to like the lowest level engineers. Okay, so we're talking about ASR, and so this is basically where I was saying we're going to take this like ultra seriously, and then what's the mission? To try to keep pushing towards the 3%?
And kind of try to build this platform where all of your, you know, audience, all of your meetings, you know, they're as easily accessible as your notes, right? Like, so like imagine all the meetings a company might have, right? You know, now that I'm like no longer a programmer, right? And I'm a quote unquote manager. That's less like my day is in meetings, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, pretty often I want to like see what was said, right? Who said it, you know, what's the context? But it's generally not really something that you can easily retrieve, right? Like imagine if all of those meetings were indexed, archived, you know, you could go back, you could share a clip like really easily, right?
So that might change completely. It's like everything that's said converted to text might change completely the dynamics of what we do in this world, especially now with remote work, right?
Exactly.
With Zoom and so on. That's fascinating to think about. I mean, for me, I care about podcasts, right? And one of the things that was, you know, I'm torn. I know a lot of the engineers at Spotify, so I love them very much because they dream big in terms of like they want to empower creators. So one of my hopes was with Spotify that they would use a technology like Rev or something like that to start converting everything into text and make it indexable. Like one of the things that sucks with podcasts is like it's hard to find stuff. Like the model is basically subscription. Like you find it's similar to what YouTube used to be like, which is you basically find a creator that you enjoy and you subscribe to them, and like you just you just kind of follow what they're doing. But the search and discovery wasn't a big part of YouTube like in the early days. And that's what currently with podcasts, like, is the search and discovery is like non-existent. You're basically searching for like the dumbest possible thing, which is like keywords in the titles of episodes.
Yeah, but even aside from search and discovery, like all the time, so I listen to like a number of podcasts, and you know, there's something said, and I want to like go back to that later because I'm trying to remember what did he say. Like maybe he like recommended some cool product that I want to try out. And like it's basically impossible. Maybe like some people have pretty good show notes, so maybe you'll get lucky and you can find it, right? But I mean, if everyone had transcripts and it was all searchable, it would be
a game changer.
It'd be so much better.
I mean, that's one of the things that I wanted to. I mean, one of the reasons we're talking today is I wanted to take this quite seriously. The ref thing. I've just been lazy, so because I'm very fortunate that a lot of people support this podcast, that there's enough money now to do transcription and so on. It seemed clear to me, especially like CEOs and sort of like PhDs, like people write to me who are like graduate students in computer science or graduate students in whatever the heck field. It's clear that their mind, like they enjoy podcasts when they're doing laundry or whatever, but they want to revisit the conversation in a much more rigorous way. And they really want a transcript. Like it's clear that they want to like analyze conversations. Like so many people wrote to me about a transcript for Yosha Bach conversation. I had just a bunch of conversations. And then on the Elon Musk side, like reporters they want to write a blog post about your conversation. So they want to be able to pull stuff. And it's like they're essentially doing on your conversation transcription privately. They're doing it for themselves and then starting to pick. But it's so much easier when you can actually do it as a reporter. Just look at the transcript.
Yeah, and you can like embed a little thing, like into your article. Right, here's what they said. Here you can go listen to like this clip from the section.
I'm actually trying to figure out. I'll probably on the website create like a place where the transcript goes, like as a web page, so that people can reference it, like reporters can reference it and so on. I mean, most of the reporters probably want to write clickbait articles that are complete falsifying, which I'm fine with. It's the way of journalism. I don't care. Like I've had this conversation with a friend of mine, a mixed martial artist, Ryan Hall, and we talked about, as I've been reading The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich and a bunch of books on Hitler, and we brought up Hitler, and he made some kind of comment where like we should be able to forgive Hitler, and like we were talking about forgiveness, and we were bringing that up as like the worst case possible thing is like even for people who are Holocaust survivors, one of the ways to let go of the suffering they've been through is to forgive. And he brought up like Hitler as somebody that would potentially be the hardest thing to possibly forgive, but it might be a worthwhile pursuit psychologically, so on, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. It was very eloquent, very powerful words. I think people should go back and listen to it. It's powerful. And then all these journalists, there's all these articles written about like MMA fight, UFC fighter,
MMA fighter loves Hitler.
No, like, no, they didn't. They were somewhat accurate. They didn't say like loves Hitler. They said thinks that if Hitler came back to life, we should forgive him. Like it's kind of accurate-ish, but the headline made it sound a lot worse than it was, but I'm fine with it. That's the way the world. I wanna almost make it easier for those journalists and make it easier for people who actually care about the conversation to go and look and see.
Right, they can see it for themselves.
There's
the headline, but
there can go. There's something about podcasts, like the audio, that makes it difficult to jump to a spot and to look for that particular information. I think some of it, I'm interested in creating, like myself experimenting with stuff. So like taking Rev and creating a transcript, and then people can go to it. I do dream that like I'm not in the loop anymore. That like, Spotify does it, right? Like automatically for everybody, because ultimately that one-click purchase needs to be there. Like,
like it kind of wants support from the entire ecosystem, right?
Exactly.
Like from the tool makers and the podcast creators, even clients, right? I mean, imagine if like most podcast apps, if it was a standard, right? Here's how you include a transcript into a podcast, right? Podcast is just an RSS feed ultimately. And actually, just yesterday I saw this company called Buzzsprout, I think they're called. So they are trying to do this. They proposed a spec, an extension to their RSS format to reference transcripts in a standard way.
Yeah.
And they're talking about like there's one client dimension that will support it, but imagine like more clients support it, right? So any podcast you could go and see the transcripts right in your like normal podcast app.
Yeah, I mean, I have somebody who works with me, helps with advertising. Matt, this awesome guy. He mentioned Buzzsprout to me, but he says it's really annoying because they want exclusive. They want to host the podcast.
Right.
This is the problem with Spotify too. This is where I'd like to say, like, F Spotify. There's a magic to RSS with podcasts. It can be made available to everyone, and then there's this ecosystem of different podcast players that emerge and they compete freely, right. And that's a beautiful thing. That's why going exclusive, like Joe Rogan went exclusive. I'm not sure if you're familiar with. He went to just Spotify. Is a huge fan of Joe Rogan. I've been kind of nervous about the whole thing, but let's see. I hope that Spotify steps up. They've added video, which was very surprising that they were
so exclusive, meaning you can't subscribe to his RSS feed anymore. It's only in Spotify.
For now, you can until December 1st. And December 1st, everything disappears and it's Spotify only. And Spotify gave him $100 million for that. Yeah, so it's an interesting deal, but I did some soul searching and I'm glad he's doing it. But if Spotify came to me with $100 million, I wouldn't do it. I have a very different relationship with money. I hate money, but I just think I believe in the pirate radio aspect of podcasting, the freedom, and that there's something about
the open source spirit.
The open source spirit, it just doesn't seem right. It doesn't feel right. That said, because so many people care about Joe Rogan's program, they're going to hold Spotify's feet to the fire. Like, one of the cool things what Joe told me is the reason he likes working with Spotify is that they're like ride or die together, right? So they want him to succeed. So that's why they're not actually telling him what to do, despite what people think. They don't give him any notes on anything. They want him to succeed. And that's the cool thing about exclusivity with a platform is like you're kind of want each other to succeed. And that process can actually be very fruitful. Like YouTube, it goes back to my criticism. YouTube generally, no matter how big the creator, I mean, maybe for PewDiePie, something like that, they want you to succeed. But for the most part, from all the big creators I've spoken with, Veritasium, all those folks, they get some basic assistance, but it's not like YouTube doesn't care if you succeed or not. Right. They have many creators.
They have like 100 other.
They don't care. So, and especially with somebody like Joe Rogan, who YouTube sees Joe Rogan not as a person who might revolutionize the nature of news and idea space and nuanced conversations. They see him as a potential person who has racist guests on, or like, they see him as like a headache potentially. So, a lot of people talk about this. It's a hard place to be for YouTube, actually, is figuring out with the search and discovery process of how do you filter out conspiracy theories and which conspiracy theories represent dangerous untruths and which conspiracy theories are like vanilla untruths. And then even when you start having meetings and discussions about what is true or not, it starts getting weird.
Yeah. It's difficult these days, right? I worry more about the other side, right? Of too much, not censorship. Well, maybe censorship is the right word. I mean, censorship is usually government censorship, but still, putting yourself in a position of arbiter for these kinds of things, it's very difficult. And people think it's so easy, right? Like, it's like, well, like no Nazis, right? What a simple principle. But, yes, I mean, no one likes Nazis.
Yeah.
But there's like many shades of gray, like very soon after that.
Yeah, and then, of course, everybody, there's some people that call our current president a Nazi, and then there's like, so you start getting Sam Harris, I don't know if you know who that is, wasted, in my opinion, his conversation with Jack Dorsey. And I spoke with Jack before on this podcast, and we'll talk again. But Sam brought up Sam Harris does not like Donald Trump.
I do listen to his podcast, so I'm familiar with his views on the matter.
And he asked Jack Dorsey, he's like, how can you not ban Donald Trump from Twitter? And so, you have that conversation. You have a conversation where some significant number of people think that the current president of the United States should not be on your platform. And it's like, okay, so if that's even on the table as a conversation, then everything's on the table for conversation. And yeah, it's tough. I'm not sure where I land on it. I'm with you. I think that censorship is bad, but I also think
ultimately, I just also think, if you're the kind of person that's going to be convinced, by some YouTube video, that, I don't know, our government's been taken over by aliens, it's unlikely that, you'll be returned to sanity simply because, that video is not available on YouTube, right?
Yeah, I'm with you. I tend to believe in the intelligence of people, and we should trust them. But I also do think it's a responsibility of platforms to encourage more love in the world, more kindness to each other. And I don't always think that they're great at doing that particular thing. So there's a nice balance there. And I think philosophically, I think about that a lot. Where's the balance between free speech and encouraging people, even though they have the freedom of speech, to not be an asshole?
Yeah, right.
That's not a constitutional so you have the right for free speech, but just don't be an asshole. You can't really put that in the Constitution. The Supreme Court can't be like, just don't be a dick. But I feel like platforms have a role to be just be nicer. Maybe do the carrot, encourage people to be nicer, as opposed to the stick of censorship. But I think it's an interesting machine learning problem. Just be nicer.
Machine learning for niceness.
It is. I mean,
responsible AI. I mean, it is a thing, for sure.
Jack Dorsey kind of talks about it as a vision for Twitter is how do we increase the health of conversations? I don't know how seriously they're actually trying to do that, though, which is one of the reasons I am in part considering entering that space a little bit.
It's difficult for them, right? Because, it's kind of well known that, people are kind of driven by, rage and, outrage maybe is a better word, right? Outrage drives engagement. And, these companies are judged by engagement, right? So it's
in the short term, but this goes to the metrics thing that we were talking about earlier. I have a fundamental belief that if you have a metric of long-term happiness of your users, not short-term engagement, but long-term happiness and growth and both intellectual, emotional health of your users, you're going to make a lot more money. You're going to have long-term, you should be able to optimize for that. You don't need to necessarily optimize for engagement. Yeah. And that'll be good for society too.
Yeah, no, I mean, I generally agree with you, but it requires a patient person with, trust from Wall Street to be able to carry out such a strategy.
This is what I believe the Steve Jobs character and Elon Musk character is you basically have to be so good at your job.
Right. You get a pass for anything.
That you can hold the board and all the investors hostage by saying either we do it my way or I leave. And everyone is too afraid of you to leave,
right?
Because they believe in your vision. But that requires being really good at what you do.
It requires being Steve Jobs and Elon Musk. And there's kind of a reason why a third name doesn't come immediately to mind, right? There is maybe a handful of other people, but it's not that many.
It's not many. I mean, people say why are you people say that I'm a fan of Elon Musk. I'm not. I'm a fan of anybody who's like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, and there's just not many of those folks.
It's the guy that made us believe that we can get to Mars, in 10 years, right? Yeah. I mean, that's kind of awesome.
And it's kind of making it happen, which is it's great.
It's kind of gone that kind of spirit, right? From a lot of our society, right? That, we can get to the moon in 10 years and we did it, right?
Yeah. Especially in this time of so much kind of existential dread that people are going through because of COVID.
Right.
Like having rockets that just keep going out there now with humans. I don't know that it just like you said. I mean, it gives you a reason to wake up in the morning and dream. For us engineers too, it is inspiring as hell, man. Well, let me ask you this: the worst possible question, which is, so you're like at the core, you're a programmer, you're an engineer, but now you made the unfortunate choice. Or maybe that's the way life goes, of basically moving away from the low level work and becoming a manager, becoming an executive, having meetings. What's that transition been like?
It's been interesting. It's been a journey. Maybe a couple of things to say about that. I mean, I got into this, right, because as a kid, I just remember this like incredible amazement at being able to write a program, right, and something comes to life that kind of didn't exist before.
Yeah.
I don't think you have that in like many other fields. Like, I mean, you have that with some other kinds of engineering, but you maybe a little bit more limited with what you can do, like, right? But with a computer, you can literally imagine any kind of program, right? So it's a little bit godlike what you do, like when you create it. And so, I mean, that's why I got into it.
Do you remember like first program you wrote, or maybe the first program that like made you fall in love with computer science?
I don't know what was the first program. It's probably like trying to write one of those games in BASIC, like emulate the Snake game or whatever. I don't remember, to be honest. But I enjoyed, like, that's what I always loved about, being a programmer, is just the creation process. And it's a little bit different when you're not the one doing the creating. And, another aspect to it, I would say, is, when you're a programmer, when you're an individual contributor, it's kind of very easy to know when you're doing a good job, when you're not doing a good job, when you're being productive, when you're not being productive, right? You can kind of see, like, you're trying to make something and it's like slowly coming together, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're a manager, it's more diffuse, right? Like, well, you hope, you're motivating your team and making them more productive and inspiring them, right? But it's not like you get some kind of like dopamine signal because you like completed X lines of code, today. So kind of like you missed that dopamine rush a little bit when you first become. But then, slowly you kind of see, yes, your teams are doing amazing work, right? And you can take pride in that.
You can get like what is it, like a ripple effect of or somebody else's dopamine rush.
Yeah. You live off other people's dopamine.
So is there pain points and challenges you had to overcome from going to a programmer to becoming a programmer of humans?
Programmer of humans. I don't know. Humans are difficult to understand, it's like one of those things, like trying to understand other people's motivations and what really drives them. It's difficult. Maybe you like never really know, right?
Do you find that people are different?
Yeah.
Like I one of the things, like I had a group at MIT that, I found that like some people I could like scream at and criticize like hard, and that made them do like much better work and really push them to their limit. And there's some people that I had to nonstop compliment because like they're so already self-critical, like about everything they do, that I have to be constantly like, like I cannot criticize them at all because they're already criticizing themselves, and you have to kind of encourage and like celebrate their little victories. And it's kind of fascinating, like how the complete difference in people.
Definitely people respond to different motivations and different modes of feedback, and you kind of have to figure it out. There's like a pretty good book, which for some reason now the name escapes me, about management. First Break All the Rules.
First Break All the Rules?
First Break All the Rules. It's a book that we generally like ask a lot of like first-time managers to read at Rev. And like one of the kind of philosophies is manage by exception, right? Which is, don't like have some standard template, like, here's how I, tell this person to do this or the other thing. Here's how I get feedback. Like manage by exception, right? Every person is a little bit different. You have to try to understand what drives them and tailor it to them.
Since you mentioned books, I don't know if you can answer this question, but people love it when I ask it, which is, are there books, technical fiction or philosophical, that you enjoyed or had an impact on your life that you would recommend? You already mentioned Dune, like
Dune.
all of the Dune.
All of the Dune. The second one was probably the weakest, but anyway, so yeah, all of the Dune is good.
I mean, yeah, can you just slow little tangent on that? Is how many Dune books are there? Like, do you recommend people start with the first one if that was?
Yeah, you kind of have to read them all. I mean, it is a complete story, right? So you start with the first one. You got to read all of them.
So it's not like a tree, like that, like a creation of like the universe that you just should go in sequence.
You should go in sequence, yeah. It's kind of a chronological storyline. There's 6 books in all. Then there's like many kind of offshoot books that were written by Frank Herbert's son, but those are not as good, so you don't have to bother with those.
Shots fired. Okay.
Shots fired.
Okay.
But the main sequence is good. So what are some other books? Maybe there's a few. So I don't know that like I would say there's a book that kind of, I don't know, turned my life around or anything like that. But here's a couple that I really love. So one is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. And it's kind of incredible how prescient he was about like what a brave new world might be like, right? You know, you kind of see genetic sorting in this book, right, where there's like these alphas and epsilons, and how from like the earliest time of society, like they're sorted. Like you can kind of see it in a slightly similar way today, where, well, one of the problems with society is people are kind of genetically sorting a little bit, right? Like there's much less, like most marriages, right, are between people of similar kind of intellectual level or socioeconomic status, more so these days than in the past. And you kind of see some effects of it in stratifying society. And kind of he illustrated what that could be like in the extreme.
Different versions of it on social media as well. It's not just like marriages and so on. Like it's genetic sorting in terms of what Dawkins called memes, as ideas,
right.
being put into these bins of these little echo chambers and so on.
Yeah, and so that's the book that's, I think, a worthwhile read for everyone. I mean, 1984 is good, of course, as well. Like if you're talking about, you know, dystopian novels of the future.
Yeah, it's a slightly different view of the future, right?
But I kind of like identify with Brave New World a little bit more.
Yeah.
Although, you know, speaking of not a book, but my favorite kind of dystopian science fiction is a movie called Brazil, which I don't know if you've heard of.
I've heard of, and I know I need to watch it. But yeah, because it's in. Is it in English or no?
It's an English movie, yeah. And it's a sort of like dystopian movie of authoritarian incompetence, right? It's like nothing really works very well, you know. The system is creaky, you know, but no one is kind of like willing to challenge it, you know, and just things kind of amble along. It kind of strikes me as like a very plausible future of like, you know, of what authoritarianism might look like. It's not like this, you know, super efficient evil dictatorship of 1984. It's just kind of like this badly functioning, you know, but it's status quo, so it just goes on.
That's one funny thing that stands out to me is in whether it's authoritarian, dystopian stuff, or just basic, like, you know, if you look at the movie Contagion, it seems that in movies, government is almost always exceptionally competent. Like it's like used as a storytelling tool of like extreme competence. Like, you know, you use it whether it's good or evil, but it's competent. It's very interesting to think about, where much more realistically is its incompetence, and that incompetence isn't itself has consequences that are difficult to predict. Like bureaucracy has a very boring way of being evil. Of just, you know, if you look at the show, HBO show Chernobyl, it's a really good story of how bureaucracy, you know, leads to catastrophic events, but not through any kind of evil in any one particular place, but more just like
it's just the system
system distorting information as it travels up the chain, that people unwilling to take responsibility for things, and just kind of like this laziness resulting in evil.
There's a comedic version of this. I don't know if you've seen this movie. It's called The Death of Stalin.
Yeah. I like that. I wish it wasn't so. There's a movie called Inglourious Bastards about Hitler and World War, so on. For some reason, those movies piss me off. I know a lot of people love them, but like, I just feel like there's not enough good movies, even about Hitler. There's good movies about the Holocaust. But even Hitler, there's a movie called Downfall that people should watch. I think it's the last few days of Hitler. That's a good movie. Turned into a meme. But it's good. But on Stalin, I feel like I may be wrong on this, but at least in the English-speaking world, there's not good movies about the evil of Stalin.
That's true. That's true. I could see that. I agree with you on Inglourious Basterds. I didn't love the movie because I felt like kind of the stylizing of it, right? The whole like Tarantino kind of Tarantinoism, if you will, kind of detracted from it and made it seem like unserious a little bit. But Death of Stalin, I felt differently. Maybe it's because it's a comedy to begin with, so it's not like I'm expecting, seriousness. But it kind of depicted the absurdity of the whole situation in a way, right? I mean, it was funny, so maybe it does make light of it, but it some degree is probably like this, right? Like a bunch of kind of people, they're like, oh shit, right? Like,
you're right. But like, the thing is, it was so close to like what probably was reality. It was caricaturing reality to where I think an observer might think that this is not like, they might think it's a comedy. In reality, that's the absurdity of how people act with dictators. I mean, I guess it was too close to reality for me.
Yeah, the kind of banality of like what were eventually like fairly evil acts, right? But like, yeah, they're just a bunch of people trying to survive. And like,
because I think there's I haven't watched it yet. The good movie on Churchill, with Gary Oldman. I think it's Gary Oldman. I might be making that up, but I think he won. Like, he was nominated for an Oscar or something. So I love these movies about these humans. And Stalin, like Chernobyl, made me realize the HBO show that there's not enough movies about Russia that capture that spirit. I'm sure it might be in Russian there is, but the fact that some British dude that like did comedy, I feel like he did like Hangover or some shit like that. I don't know if you're familiar with the person who created Chernobyl, but he was just like some guy that doesn't know anything about Russia, and he just went in and just studied it, like did a good job of creating and then got it so accurate, like poetically, and the facts that you need to get accurate, he got accurate. Just the spirit of it, down to like the bowls that pets use, just the whole feel of it. It's incredible.
It's good. Yeah, I saw the series.
Yeah, it's incredible. It made me wish that somebody did a good 1930s like starvation that Stalin led to, like leading up to World War II, and in World War II itself, like Stalingrad and so on. Like, I feel like that story needs to be told. Yeah. Millions of people died. And it's to me, it's so much more fascinating than Hitler, because Hitler is like a caricature of evil almost, that it's so, especially with the Holocaust, it's so difficult to imagine that something like that is possible ever again. Stalin, to me, represents something that is possible. Like the so interesting, like the bureaucracy of it is so fascinating that it potentially might be happening in the world now, like that we're not aware of, like with North Korea, another one that like there should be a good film on. And like the possible things that could be happening in China with overreach of government. I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities there, I suppose.
Yeah, I wonder how much, I guess the archives should be maybe more open nowadays, right? I mean, for a long time, we didn't know, right? Yeah. Like, or anyways, no one in the West knew for sure.
Well, I don't know if you know him, there's a guy named Stephen Kotkin. He is a historian of Stalin that I spoke to on this podcast. I'll speak to him again. The guy knows his shit on Stalin. He like read everything, and
that's cool.
It's so fascinating to talk to somebody like he knows Stalin better than Stalin knew himself. It's crazy. Like you have, so I think he's at Princeton. He is basically his whole life is Stalin.
Studying Stalin.
Yeah, it's great. And in that context, he also talks about and writes about Putin a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I've also read at this point, I think every biography of Putin, English biography of Putin. I need to read some Russians. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I'm mentally preparing for a possible conversation with Putin.
So, what is your first question to Putin when you have him on your on the podcast?
It's interesting you bring that up. First of all, I wouldn't tell you, but
can't give it away now.
But I actually haven't even thought about that. So my current approach, and I do this with interviews often, obviously that's a special one, but I try not to think about questions until last minute.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to sort of get into the mindset. And so that's why I'm soaking in a lot of stuff, not thinking about questions, just learning about the man. But in terms of like human to human, it's like, I would say I don't know if you're a fan of mob movies, but like the mafia, which I am, like Goodfellas and so on, he's much closer to like mob morality, which is like...
Mob morality, maybe. I could see that. But I like your approach anyways of this, the extreme empathy, right? It's a little bit like, Hannibal, right? Like if you ever watched the show Hannibal, right? They had that guy, Hannibal, of course, like...
Silence of the Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs. But there was a TV show as well, and they focused on this guy, Will Durant, who's a character like extreme empath, right? So in the way he like catches all these killers is he pretty much... he can empathize with them, right? Like he can understand why they're doing the things they're doing, right? And it's a pretty excruciating thing, right? Like because you're pretty much like spending half your time in the head of evil people, right? Like, but
I mean, I definitely try to do that with others. So you should do that in moderation. But I think it's a pretty safe place to be. Like one of the cool things with this podcast, and I don't know, you didn't sign up to hear me listen to this bullshit, but
no, but it's interesting.
What's his name? Chris Latner, who's a Google. He's not Google anymore. Sci-fi. He's legit. He's one of the most legit engineers I talk with. I talk with him again on this podcast, and he gives me private advice a lot. And he said for this podcast, I should I should widen the range of people because that gives you much more freedom to do stuff. Like, so his idea, which I think I agree with Chris, is that you go to the extremes. You just like cover every extreme base, and then it gives you freedom to then go to the more nuanced conversations. It's kind of, I think there's a safe place for that. There's certainly a hunger for that nuanced conversation, I think, amongst people, where like on social media, you get canceled for anything slightly tense, that there's a hunger to go full.
Right, you go so far to the opposite side. And it like demystifies it a little bit, right?
Yeah,
there is a person behind all of these things.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about podcasting, like 3-4 hour conversations that it's very different than the clickbait journalism. It's like the opposite, that there's a hunger for that. Mm-hmm. There's a willingness for that.
Yeah, especially now. I mean, how many people do you even see face to face anymore? Right? Like this, It's like not that many people, like in my day to day, aside from my own family, that like I sit across.
It's sad, but it's also beautiful. Like I've gotten the chance to, like our conversation now. There's somebody, I guarantee you, there's somebody in Russia listening to this now, like jogging. There's somebody who is just smoke some weed, sit back on a couch, and just like enjoying. Like I guarantee you that will write in the comments right now that yes, I'm in St. Petersburg, I'm in Moscow, I'm whatever, and we're in their head. Mm-hmm. And they have a friendship with us, and I'm the same way. I'm a huge fan of podcasting. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's a weird one-way human connection. Like before I went on Joe Rogan, and still I'm just a huge fan of his. So it was like surreal. I've been friends with Joe Rogan for 10 years, but one way.
From this way, from the St. Petersburg way.
Yeah, the St. Petersburg way. And it's a real friendship. I mean, now it's like two-way, but it's still surreal. And that's the magic of podcasting. I'm not sure what to make of it. That voice, it's not even the video part. It's the audio that's magical. that I don't know what to do with it, but it's people listen to 3-4 hours.
Yeah, we evolved over millions of years, right, to be very fine-tuned to things like that, right?
Yeah.
Well, expressions as well, of course, right? But back in the day on the savannah, you had to be very attuned to whether you had a good relationship with the rest of your tribe or a very bad relationship, right? Because if you had a very bad relationship, you were probably going to be left behind and eaten by the lions.
Yeah,
So,
but it's weird that the tribe is different now. Like you could have a connection, one-way connection with Joe Rogan, as opposed to the tribe of your physical vicinity.
But that's why it works with the podcasting, right? But it's the opposite of what happens on Twitter, right? Because all those nuances are removed, right? You're not connecting with the person, because you don't hear the voice. You're connecting with like an abstraction, right? It's like some stream of tweets, right? And it's very easy to assign to them any kind of like evil intent, or dehumanize them, which it's much harder to do when it's a real voice, right? Because like you realize it's a real person behind the voice.
Let me try this out on you. I sometimes ask about the meaning of life. Do you, your father now, an engineer, you're building up a company. Do you ever zoom out and think, like, what the hell is this whole thing for? Like, why are we descendants of apes even on this planet? What's the meaning of it all?
That's a pretty big question. I think I don't allow myself to think about it too often, or maybe like life doesn't allow me to think about it too often. But in some ways, I guess the meaning of life is kind of contributing to this kind of weird thing we call humanity, right? Like it's, in a way, you can think of humanity as like a living and evolving organism, right? That like we all contributing in a slight way, but just by existing, by having our own unique set of desires and drives, right? And maybe that means like creating something great, and it's bringing up kids who are unique and different, and seeing like taking joy in what they do. But I mean, to me, that's pretty much it. I mean, if you're not a religious person, right, which I guess I'm not, that's the meaning of life. It's in the living and in
creation
and the creation.
Yeah, there's something magical about that engine of creation. Like you said, programming. I would say, I mean, it's even just actually what you said with even just programs. I don't care if it's like some JavaScript thing on a button on the website. It's like magical that you brought that to life. I don't know what that is in there, but that's probably some version of recreation of like reproduction and sex, whatever that's in evolution. But like creating that HTML button has echoes of that feeling, and it's magical.
Right. Well, I mean, if you're a religious person, maybe you could even say, right, like we were created in God's image, right? Well, I mean, I guess part of that is the drive to create something ourselves, right? I mean, that's part of it.
Yeah, that HTML button is the creation in God's.
So I mean, maybe hopefully it'll be something a little more
so dynamic, maybe
bigger,
some
dynamic.
JavaScript.
Yeah, maybe some JavaScript, some React, and so on. But no, I mean, I think that's what differentiates us from the apes, so to speak.
Yeah, we did a pretty good job. Dan, it was honor to talk to you. Thank you so much for being part of creating one of my favorite services and products. This is actually a little bit of an experiment. Allow me to sort of fanboy over some of the things I love. So thanks for wasting your time with me today. It was really
awesome.
Fun.
Thanks for having me on and giving me a chance to try this out.
Awesome. Thanks for listening to this conversation with Dan Kokotov, and thank you to our sponsors. Athletic Greens, Only One Nutrition Drink, Blinkist app that summarizes books, Business Wars podcast, and Cash App. So the choice is health, wisdom, or money. Choose wisely, my friends. And if you wish, click the sponsor links below to get a discount and to support this podcast. And now let me leave you with some words from Ludwig Wittgenstein. The limits of my language means the limits of my world. Thank you for listening, and hope to see you next time.